Fascism is the ideology which is on the far right of the right-left political spectrum. It is characterized by the extreme nationalism, where there would even be force used on the citizens of their own nation. Fascism is such a disaster to this humanity because nowhere the fascist group made it peacefully. North Korea is the place where there is fascism. North Korea now is on the path followed by the then Japan of World War II. The present ideology in North Korea is the race-based nationalism which is derived from Japanese fascism. Many think that North Korean government is a communist government, but it is rather the opposite. It is the heights of fascism where their own people have no rights, suppressed and exploited in all possible ways. The government's racist criteria for national identity paints its genetically Korean citizens as innocent and morally virtuous, as opposed to foreigners, but militarily weak, requiring Kim Il-sung's charismatic guidance and protection. This may be a strategy by the government to decrease the amount of repression and surveillance needed to control that public. Even after half a century ruling a country gives the idea that there is no existence of communism, for communism is the system where the society is classless, partyless, and there would be no hereditary power to rule. Cambodia used to be a fascist country until 1990s, but fortunately not now. It is so sad for the humanity, for fascism is still having its way on 25 million people of North Korea. This far-right ideology was the cause of 2 world wars, and if this continues it would be the end of humanity. So it is said as the greatest enemy to humanity. I think people seem to confuse totalitarian dictatorship with fascism. All fascism is totalitarian dictatorship, but not all totalitarian dictatorship is fascism. If the economy mostly in private hands, it is based on capitalist economy, and it is fascist. Usually the power of the old capitalist establishment collapses, but there is no democratic power to take over, and fascist demagogues fill the power vacuum with the financial help of some panicky oligarchs. It happened in Germany, Spain, Italy, etc. in the past, and might happen as we speak in the US and a few other places where demagogue hate propaganda is doing rather well in the absence of a democratic alternative bloc. In USSR, China, etc., the economy became collectively owned, but the new owners of poor populations were too weak to exercise power through developing democracy, due to lack of overabundance, literacy, and any idea what democracy is supposed to be about. The power vacuum here was filled by the old Tsarist establishment bureaucracy, and Stalinist totalitarian dictatorship resulted. Maybe some thinks this is just semantics, but there are subtle differences. The point is, that fascism is not supposed to be democratic ever in their design, and all new fascists want to repeat the old, going back into some never-existed golden age of purity and domination of the chosen people. While present-day socialists learned from the past and know that collective ownership of the economy only possible with grassroots up-built democracy, so they abhor repeating any mistakes that lead into Stalinist dictatorship in the past. Knowing that the initial conditions for democracy in our present-day global overproduction, literacy, communication, global connectiveness, and some awareness in what democracy is supposed to be as a practical alternative to stop the capitalist chaos of crises, environmental destruction built on the instability of inequality. Mandeville makes the modern and popular identification of fascism with the extreme right, which is neither historically nor philosophically justified. It consistently presented itself, and was invented to be, an alternative to international socialism. It presented itself as a third option, distinct from conservative and conventional socialism, a national socialism. Of the dozens of fascist movements active in the last century, only a handful had any success: England, USA, Italy, and Germany. Mandeville's identification of North Korea as a stronghold of fascism brings the circular reasoning full circle. Obviously, fascism is not merely totalitarian rule. The repressions of the fascist and Nazi rule only started once they had gained power, and in great part, after they had abandoned fascism. They each acted like empires, doing whatever it took to stay in power. That so many people were willing to roll over and play dead to the moral obscenity of totalitarian rule is a study in the fallibility of the human culture, rather than a statement of philosophy. Regardless, of all the things fascism was not, a rightist conservative ideology tops the list. If one looks for similarities to fascism, the use of the American Legion to enforce price controls in Wilson's USA is a good place to start. I believe that you are coming from the stance that since there are no current fascist nations, there is no fascist philosophy. You must understand that the two are completely different. Just because the Soviet Union was communist, there were still people in the country who held fascist beliefs. Similarly, in fascist Nazi Germany, there were certainly people who held communist beliefs. Thus, there certainly are still people who believe in this philosophy despite being on the fringes of society. For instance, neo-Nazis are a great example of present-day people who have fascist beliefs.